Guten Tag and welcome to our presentation. We are Team E8620 and proudly represent the Hertie School in Berlin. In our treaty reform, we want to counter imbalances in access and representation in EU elections by introducing an all-new electoral system and stressing the role of transnational European lists. Today, we are more than happy and honored to present our vision for a stronger, more democratic and more transparent union. In our presentation, we first are going to lay out our main motivation and subsequently propose a new electoral procedure that introduces a more balanced representation system. Afterwards, we will operationalize the legislative reform and dissect its main components before summarizing our key findings and presenting a roadmap with the next steps. In 2017, Emmanuel Macron's famous Sorbonne speech called for a renewal of the European Union. However, his speech could not have happened at the worst point in time. His revolutionary vision was shadowed by Brexit, Trump, as well as other dramatic crises. Almost 4 years later, however, the time to act has come. We pick up Macron's ball and pursue his vision of a more integrated EU by reforming its electoral system and introducing transnational lists for the 2024 parliamentary elections. But how to proceed? Our treaty reform addresses several issues at once and transforms the EU, making it more democratic and transparent. Looking at the EU election voter turnout, the numbers have been decreasing constantly. Recent elections in 2019, however, indicate a potential for reversal as the turnout increased. This shows that the European vision is not dead yet. Indeed, there is hope for the future. We propose a treaty reform that tackles the EU's legitimacy crisis, renews European representation, enhances EU policymaking, improves European collaboration, and strengthens the European identity. This ultimately paves the way for a bright future of peace and prosperity. So far, nearly all reforms have tried to tackle crises. With Trump and Brexit being history, there is opportunity for a significant reform. However, in order to tackle ongoing challenges such as migration, climate change, populism, and pandemics, we need a stronger union that speaks with one voice. Our proposal joins a series of significant changes. In order to drive change and truly reform the European Union, we propose a treaty reform that introduces a new electoral system and thereby fosters legitimacy. My colleague Philip will now begin to lay out the process forward.
Hello and welcome from my side as well. It is my pleasure to now dig into the core of our proposal, introducing a two-vote electoral system. So what do we propose? We deem it a good call to have a system of personalized proportional representation, following the example of the German personalisierte Verhältniswahl. As such, it encompasses two votes. A first vote for the national constituency, which is distributed digressively proportional and guarantees a minimum amount of seats, and a second vote, which regulates the distribution of the leftover seats and allows citizens to vote for European parties only. While the first vote safeguards the interest of the smaller countries, the second vote paves the way for transnational lists. This would mean a huge change, since up to now, European elections are national elections on national issues. That means that I, as a German, can only vote for Germans from German parties, which fundamentally does not make it a European election at all. We are sure that this reform will allow the EU to benefit in several ways. Currently, the EU elections do not differ significantly from national elections, and thus are also perceived as such by the European electorate. This continues to highly bias European politics, since the European perspective of both the candidates and the voters is severely limited during elections. Consequently, the European Parliament functions as a national representation convention rather than a parliament of a union. Right now, the voters base their vote to contesting parties on national preferences. Reform is urgently needed at the campaign stage to highlight issues common to the EU as a whole. This protracts to the legislation process where European parliamentarians are accountable to national constituencies. By giving one vote to transnational lists, the change of perspective in election campaigns and legislation is completed with the creation of truly European parties. This forms heart and base to reiterating the shift from the national domination in the EU system. So far, the European system is an administrative and abstract institution, hovering over citizens in their nationally focused daily lives. Already in founding times, however, the idea was to one day establish a truly European and sovereign state. Besides politics and economics, it must develop a true European identity. And this European demos, this public sphere, shall be advanced by this plan. I will now hand over to Matumita.
In order to operationalize the proposed reform, they require adaptation into the legislation. This requires the involvement of member states through a standard, not a simplified treaty reform procedure. I step in here to take you through the legislative procedure. The following slides delve into the amendments proposed in the respective primary and secondary EU sources. What is presented here is a comprehensive presentation of revisions needed in the EU legislative sources. To aid comprehension, the textual detailing is represented individually in the following slides. To explain our reform, we highlight the proposed amendments using the colors red and blue in the following slides. Red is the current phrasing and the revision we propose is highlighted with blue. Firstly, we incorporate revision in Chapter 39, subsection 1 of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. Through this revision, we aim to modify the interpretation of EU elections from a national to a wider perspective. We need revised conditions to be established for the EU elections to differentiate them from national elections. These conditions may be tailor-made for every member state with the involvement of national representatives. The idea here is to share and make transparent the decision-making process. Another hindrance we observe is the variation of conditions of voting and contesting rights across states of the EU. We propose to dissolve these differences and make such conditions more standardized across the Union. Although the single transferable vote system attempts to achieve proportionality, it severely restricts choice of rankings only within national constituencies. In many instances, the whole state is a single constituency, thus limiting choice and efficacy of the voting procedure. Through the highlighted changes, we move from the single transferable vote system to a purely proportional voting mechanism. Our reform guarantees that member states' autonomy remains intact for the first vote. Article 2 allows every member state the establishment of constituencies in different manners. We, however, propose to revise the establishment of constituencies based on the number of first vote seats, which is distributed digressively proportional. An exception of a different manner in subdivisions may be possible in special circumstances. We envision an increased role of European Parliament as against the member states in setting a minimum threshold for the allocation of seats. The minimum threshold is now applied to the European party lists in the second vote only. The subparagraphs 2 and 3 were added in the Lisbon Treaty. However, they only regard national specifications which we, by means of this reform, would like to eliminate. Thus, they will not be replaced. The reforms proposed in this paper have been built on the suggestions and thought exercises from various discussions hitherto. Our draft reform has provided a pragmatic framework for immediate adoption into electoral procedure. Implementing these treaty reforms shall bring an end to the institutional deadlock of the Union and kickstart elevation to a renewed era of the EU. By this, we make the EU accessible to its own citizens and shape its collective identity on the global stage. On that note, we thank the Hertie School, Jacques Delors Centre Berlin, Civica Alliance and fellow Future EU Organizing Committee members for enabling us this platform to present our reform for the future of EU. It has been an enjoyable and an insightful journey, and we hope to come back on stage tomorrow to present our case one last time.